At first glance, Francisco Goya's The Straw Manikin looks like a cheerful scene of entertainment. Four young women playing what appears to be a simple game, tossing a doll in the air using a blanket. Their faces are bright with laughter, their cheeks rosy with excitement, and the scene seems to capture a moment of pure, innocent joy. But as with many of Goya's works, there's something lurking beneath the surface. Something that transforms this seemingly playful scene into a haunting commentary on power, gender dynamics, and the nature of human cruelty. Created between 1791 and 1792, this painting was originally commissioned as a tapestry design for King Charles IV's office at El Escorial Palace. But before we can fully understand the haunting meaning behind the straw mannequin, we need to know something about the fascinating man who created it. Francisco Goya wasn't always the dark, revolutionary artist we know him as today. In fact, when he painted The Straw Manikin, he was still climbing the social ladder, working his way up through the Spanish court with calculated precision. But Goya was going through an interesting transformation during this period. He was becoming increasingly aware of the contradictions and hypocrisies in Spanish society. He saw the gap between the glittering world of the court and the harsh realities of common life. He witnessed the impact of the French Revolution on Spanish politics and observed how the ruling class clung desperately to their power while the winds of change blew through Europe. This was Goya in his romantic days, as some critics call them, before he became the artist who would later paint nightmarish scenes on the walls of his home and create the haunting black paintings. But even in these earlier, seemingly lighter works, we can see the seeds of his later darkness beginning to sprout. The Straw Manikin represents a crucial moment in this evolution, a time when Goya was mastering the art of hiding subversive messages beneath pleasing surfaces. The painting came at a particularly interesting moment in Goya's career. He had just become court painter to the new king, Charles IV, and this series of tapestry designs was to be his first major contribution in this role. But Goya had already begun to lose interest in these happy peasant scenes. His heart wasn't in creating mere decorative pieces anymore, but he couldn't exactly tell the king that, could he? Instead, he found ways to inject his growing cynicism and social commentary into these supposedly innocent works. He wasn't just painting a pretty picture for the king's office. He was encoding a complex critique of power, gender, and society into what appeared to be a simple scene of entertainment. It's like he was playing a sophisticated game of hide and seek with meaning, and we're still discovering new layers to his work centuries later. Now that we understand the context, let's take a closer look at what's actually happening in this painting, because every element Goya included is loaded with meaning. And trust me, nothing in this painting is as innocent as it seems. Let's start with our main character, the straw mannequin himself. Take a good look at him. Notice anything odd? Despite being tossed in the air, which should be a moment of lightness and fun, there's something deeply unsettling about his appearance. His gaze is vacant, almost haunted, with those bright pink sheets that seem more like a mockery of life than a sign of health. His limbs hang limply, completely at the mercy of the forces acting upon him. Goya's preliminary sketches for the painting actually showed the mannequin enjoying his flight. But in the final version, he appears to be a helpless victim, tossed against his will. The mannequin's French-style clothing is particularly significant. Those silly French pigtails and spots of rouge that art historian Robert Hughes points out weren't just random fashion choices. They were Goya's way of satirizing the French court and its influence on Spanish society. Remember, this was painted not long after the French Revolution, when attitudes toward French culture and politics were particularly complex in Spain. The mannequin's fashionable but ridiculous appearance becomes a commentary on the superficiality and powerlessness of the ruling class. Then there are the four women, who at first glance appear to be having innocent fun. But look at their expressions more carefully. There's something almost predatory in their enjoyment. They're not just playing, they're exercising power. Their control over the mannequin is absolute, and their laughter takes on a darker tone when you realize this. They're positioned around the blanket like points on a compass, suggesting both the seasons and the wheel of fortune, turning endlessly and determining the fate of those caught in its cycle. The setting itself carries meaning too. The open sky above the scene might initially seem to represent freedom, but it actually emphasizes the mannequin's helplessness. He's suspended in the air but has no control over his movement. He's trapped in a cycle of rising and falling, all at the whim of his tormentors. The composition creates a stark contrast between the vast free space above and the confined manipulated space where the action takes place. Even the blanket itself is symbolic. In carnival traditions, blanket tossing was a common festival activity, but it was also a form of public humiliation and punishment. By placing this scene in a supposedly playful context, Goya manages to comment on power, control, and cruelty, while maintaining the appearance of depicting mere entertainment. The use of color in the painting is particularly clever. The soft, pleasant palette typical of Goya's tapestry designs serves to mask the darker undertones of the scene. It's like putting poison in a beautiful bottle. The attractive exterior makes the disturbing content even more powerful when you recognize it. The contrast between the bright, cheerful colors and the dark meaning of the scene creates a cognitive dissonance that makes the painting's message all the more unsettling. Now we come to the really fascinating part. What does it all mean? Let's explore some of the most compelling interpretations that have emerged over the years. The most immediate reading of the painting is as a commentary on gender dynamics and power. The helpless mannequin, dressed in his fashionable French style, represents a kind of emasculated nobility, while the women wielding power over him suggest a shifting social order. But there's also a political interpretation that goes beyond gender. Remember, this was painted during a time of tremendous political upheaval in Europe. The French Revolution had sent shockwaves through the continent's aristocracy, and Spain's own political situation was increasingly unstable. In this context, the mannequin could represent the nobility itself, dressed up in fine clothes but ultimately powerless, at the mercy of forces it couldn't control. The women with their carnival associations become representatives of the common people, playing with their supposed superiors as if they were mere toys. Some scholars see an even darker metaphor at work here. The mannequin's passive acceptance of his fate, his painted-on smile contrasting with his dead eyes, suggests a kind of existential commentary. Aren't we all, in some way, like this mannequin? Pushed and pulled by forces beyond our control, maintaining a pleasant facade while being tossed about by fate? This reading transforms the painting from a specific social or political commentary into a universal statement about human powerlessness and the masks we wear to cope with it. The painting leaves us wondering whether the power dynamics it depicts are temporary or permanent. There's also an interesting interpretation that focuses on the artistic process itself. Some see the mannequin as a stand-in for the artist, forced to perform for his patrons, creating cheerful scenes on command while feeling increasingly alienated from his work. This reading gains strength when we consider Goya's own position at the time, a court painter required to produce happy peasant scenes while harboring much darker artistic ambitions. The painting's influence extended beyond visual art. Spanish composer Enrique Granados was so moved by it that he incorporated it into his opera Goyescas. The first tableau opens with this very scene, translating Goya's visual commentary into a musical form. This adaptation shows how the painting's themes of power, play, and cruelty resonated across artistic boundaries and continued to speak to audiences in new ways. It's amazing how a single painting can tell us so much about power, society, and human nature. And it makes you wonder, what other hidden meanings are we missing in the art around us? If you found this deep dive fascinating, you're going to love what's coming next on this channel. I've got more videos lined up exploring the secret messages in famous artworks throughout history. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of these art mysteries. What do you think about Goya's hidden message? Do you see other meanings in the painting that we didn't cover? Share your thoughts in the comments below.